worship. You may not realize it, but your pastor is a mind reader. Yes, indeed, and I can prove it by telling you what many of you were thinking, are thinking now, at the time you found out that once again I was going to preach about Zacchaeus. Because I know what Susan's reaction was when she first learned of it. Essentially, it went something like, what? Another Zacchaeus sermon? Do you have nothing else to preach on? And yes, I do. I have lots of things. But let me take this moment to remind you of something I've said before, and I definitely will be saying again, that each and every Bible story contains within it multiple sermons layered together. Listen to that, multiple sermons layered together. In fact, as I listened to Kathy read the scriptures, I came up with 3, 4, 5 more points for my next time that I preach on Zacchaeus, a few months down the road. Each and every biblical story contains within it multiple sermons layered together, waiting to be preached. Each one of them has a different point to be made. Each one of them has a different emphasis they want to work on. Each one has a different lesson to be taught from it. In fact, you must say, and I admit, a biblical story can and does have a lot to do with a slice of lasagna. Yes, yes, indeed. Where the piece of lasagna, and if you're not big on Italian food, you can think of baklava, a Subway sandwich, a multi-layered chocolate cake, where like the piece of lasagna, the overall story is enhanced by what is contained in one story after another. And it's only by reading it carefully and listening to each of those stories do you really get the full flavor of that story that God has put there for us to learn from. And when you take them all together, oh, the pasta, the sauce, oh, and yes, yes, the cheese. The lasagna is delicious, and the biblical story is just ripe for use in many different sermons. So having said that, a brief review of what or who this man is, just in case you might be one of the people who did not know the Zacchaeus story and how it fit into the Gospels. A quick review of who he is. Now Zacchaeus, who, if you don't mind, can I call him Zach for short every now and then?
Sure.
Zacchaeus was both the most beloved and at the same time most despised man in all of Jericho. And no, I did not put the two-sided coin this time. He was both the most beloved and the most despised. Because of the fact that even though he was a devout Jew, he was a child of Israel. He was also working for the Romans, who had occupied the land after conquering it. Yes, he was and I've been working on pronouncing this correctly, a collaborator. How about that? I hit it close. He was a collaborator for the enemy. And no wonder no one liked him, because he was also a tax collector. And how many love to pay our taxes? No, we don't, do we? And if the tax collector happens to be crooked and always skims some off the top for himself, as most of them did, with all the money not staying there in Israel but being sent away to Rome, no wonder people resented him, what he did, what he stood for. So of course, as I said, the Romans loved him. He was great at his job. In fact, he had been promoted to chief tax collector, while his own people would have nothing to do with him. They would not come to his luxurious home to dine. In fact, they refused to break bread with him at any time. They would cross the street when they saw him coming. And if he sat down next to them at temple, they would get up and move away. And on top of this, and this was something that he had lived with all his life, he had the misfortune of being short in stature, probably 5 feet tall at best, with people saying he looked more like a child than a man. And so he had a very lonely life. He lived a very isolated life. In fact, being so alone, it really wasn't much of a life at all. And that, in a nutshell, is who Zacchaeus was. So now, once again, why is this story important for us to hear? And the answer is because there are so many lessons to learn from studying his life closely. For instance, the first of 3 for today. Lesson 1, which shows us you can have all the possessions in the world. You can be one of the richest people in the world and still not have what you need the most, a purpose for being, a reason for getting up each and every day, something to look forward to that causes you to leap out of bed and seize the day, something which you do which gives meaning to your life, a reason for being. And in line with this, it allows you to possess the knowledge that who you are and what you do is of importance to others. Others value you. Others look forward to seeing you. Others look forward to being with you. Because your very presence in their life brings you both joy and happiness as it does them. And that's what a life should have been, but was something that Zacchaeus definitely did not have. And we learn that to have all the possessions without friendship and love in your life brings you to nothing. Which brings us to lesson 2, as Zach begins to search for the meaning and purpose in life, which eventually is going to lead him, thankfully, to Jesus. Now, as I say this, here is a question for you to consider. So he needs to find purpose in life. He needs to find meaning in life. He needs to find a reason for giving in life. So how did he know where to start, where to look? It wasn't like he could have just Googled it, looked it up on Facebook, just exactly like that, finding purpose in life. That there wasn't something he could do. It wasn't there on the market shelves where he could go and pick something. He could not order it on Amazon. How did Zacchaeus know where to look? How did he know what to look for? How did he know who to look for to find the meaning and the purpose that was lacking in his life? And the answer to that is, which leads to the second important lesson today, and listen carefully because it's going to come back to you. He knew the answer to all these questions because he heard other people talking. Listen to that again. He knew where all he needed to go because he had heard other people talking. In this case, people talking about Jesus, talking about who Jesus was, speaking about who they thought he might be, sharing with others what they had seen him do. And also importantly for the story, they talked about how Jesus was changing the lives of the people he encountered. Exactly what he needed. Now, if you think about it, you will know this is the only way that Zach would have known to seek out Jesus. For he had never heard him preach a sermon. There's no record of that. He had never been present when he taught a lesson in the synagogue. No mention of that. He had not encountered Jesus along the roadway as he walked by one way and the other. He had not been present when he performed a miracle. Those are all other ways that other people have encountered Jesus. But Zacchaeus had never done that. Instead, Zacchaeus kept his ears open wherever he went. And as he did so, maybe he heard people talking as they were standing in line to pay taxes. And he stopped and paused and listened to what they were saying. Or maybe he had been on the way to the marketplace and was working his way through the crowds and found little clusters of people who were excitedly talking about their most recent Jesus experience. And he stopped and paused and kind of overheard for a bit. Or maybe he just sat on his patio, on the windows of his home, and listened to what people were talking about as they walked by. However it happened, here is the second important lesson to learn from Zach. He would not have learned about Jesus unless he heard other people talking about him. Listen to that carefully. It's coming back your way in a moment. He would have not learned about Jesus unless he had heard other people talking about him, sharing their faith, talking about their experiences, witnessing listen to their new faith and what it was doing for them. Which, in line with this, I then now turn to you and ask, are you ready to be convicted? Tell me, how many people have heard you talking about Jesus lately? Just a pause. How many have heard you talking about Jesus, your faith, your church lately? Your Christian beliefs, your participation in his church, and what the Christian faith has done in your life. You know, have you ever heard the expression, I did it when I was a youth minister in a play, if you were arrested for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? That's what we're talking about. Who has listened and heard from you, and then taken the first steps towards that journey themselves? That's lesson number 2. Which then brings us to the third point that I will have time to share today. That once Zach decides that he wants to at least see Jesus, to be in his presence, and even from a distance, he has to work through obstacles to be able to do so. And he is not going to let anything stand in his way from getting with Jesus, because he does not know if this opportunity is going to present itself again. So first of all, he had to find out where Jesus was going to travel through the city, which meant talking to other people who did not want to talk back to him. But he did. He asked and asked and asked and finally found what route he would go. So one obstacle over. Then he moves on, and he finds out that there are already, when he arrives, huge crowds waiting for him. And he has to work his way through it. And it would have been difficult for a man of full size, but almost impossible for someone as small in stature as him. But he had to push through, probably literally, to get where he was going to need, because he was not going to let an obstacle stand in his way between himself and his Jesus experience. Then he discovers yet another obstacle. He got there, but he still could not see. Everybody was taller than he was. And he was too proud to crawl underneath their legs. He was too proud to say, can I stand on your shoulders? And he was wondering, how am I going to overcome this? He wanted to see Jesus. He needed to see Jesus to experience what it was like to be in his presence. So it's almost as if he looked up to God to say, what can I... Oh, tree branches. Tree branches. Now, another obstacle, I don't imagine he ever really climbed trees before, but he did not let that stop him. And so he climbs up into the tree so that he is able to be with Jesus, overcoming each of the obstacles that had come up in his way that could have kept him away. The end result being Zacchaeus did overcome each of them, and he was granted an incredible, I am coming to your house for dinner experience with Jesus. Now listen to that, because you don't realize how big that is. And I came up with an analogy for this. I hope we've got some Swifties here. He had an incredible coming to your house for dinner experience, which is similar to you are at a Taylor Swift concert, outside the door where you know she's going to come out. You're lined with all the people behind the barricades. And thank you, Avicia. And she starts to come out, and she's waving at everybody, and you're waving and you're smiling. And she sees Abby standing next to Dorothy and Charlie. And she comes over, and Taylor puts her arms around you and takes a selfie. Yes, a selfie with Taylor Swift. Thank you, thank you. And you go home, and you're clutching your camera going, oh my gosh, this was the greatest experience in my life. Well, that's what it was like. Zacchaeus is there. Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house for dinner. What an experience it was. And he had the chance to be there. Now, what I wish for today, and some of this may get me in trouble, and I'm sorry if I step on your toes, but pastors are to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. That's what Brown Barr used to teach in seminary. That wouldn't it be great if more people would work through the obstacles in life today so that they could get to Jesus, so they could get to the faith, so they could get to the church. Wouldn't it be nice? But in my 40 years of ministry, I have heard every reason and every excuse for why people aren't in church, and I'm sure you have too. Anybody ever hear, but Sunday is my only day to sleep in, Pastor? Of course, I get up every Saturday morning at 7 to hit the golf course because I've got to be, my tea time is at 8. But get up and be in church each week? Oh, that's asking so much. Pastor, I would love to be there. But you know, worship takes a couple hours out of each day. And when you're trying to watch 4 or 5 football games a week, Monday night, Thursday night, and 3 stacked together on Sunday, you just can't give up that morning time. After all, don't I need to see 5 games? How many remember when football was only on Sundays? And you had to wait all week long. Pastor, I know the church is always asking for money, and I just don't have anything to give. After I went to Costco and saw that new gigantic TV they had, you know, the one that was just smarter than anything, that had, you know, more intelligence to it than computer things, and I just had to have it, even though it was brand new, and in about 6 weeks the price would be in half, but I had to get it there. But passing that offering plate, gosh, Lord, I don't have many $1 bills. So, people have excuses. People have reasons. So many of them, and they could go on and on. They let them become the obstacles that keep them from the most important part in their life. And so, the story of Zacchaeus says, we need, when those come up, to find ways to get around them. We need to find ways to overcome them. We need to find ways to bypass them. Yes, I love sports, and it's great to watch them. Yes, it's neat to be involved in sports. Yes, it's nice to have possessions. But isn't there balance in our life somehow where we can have both? I think in similar ways, people who work 70 or 80 hours a week to earn money for their family, but then spend no time with their family. You know what I'm talking about there. So we realize that everyone has obstacles that will block our way. But if we want the true purpose and meaning in life, we will work to do away with it. So in summary, this is what we have from the lessons of Zacchaeus this week. First, that everyone needs a purpose in life to give their life meaning. I need a purpose in life. Secondly, that it's vital for our faith experience that we are able to hear others talk about it, share about it, witness to it, give testimony to it, because it's by learning from others that we are then led ourselves. And that means we need to be talking a lot more than we are. And then thirdly, yes, I understand there are obstacles there, but are there ways that I can work around that? If Sunday mornings are really that hard, let me find you a Saturday evening worship. You know, if Sunday mornings are so hard, let me find a way that's streamed online. Abby's put it there, and you can watch it Monday night and not Monday night, Tuesday night, and worship it then. No football on Tuesday. Let me find ways. So, help me find purpose in life, Zacchaeus does. Help me be able to learn from others, which Zacchaeus did. And then be able to separate anything that kept him. And as you know, as you heard from that experience, his life was changed, his life was transformed. We can only imagine, and the scriptures never tell us, what was his life like 3 months later? What was Zacchaeus' life like 3 months later, when he gave half of his money to the poor? And the joy that came from giving and sharing. He underwrote the Hot Meals Ministry program for 6 months. He was glad to do so. What joy it was bringing in his life. What was his life like when people actually started talking to him? Because he found those people he may have cheated, and he paid them back, and he gave them compensation, and then from then on only took what was essential for the job. And people appreciated the fact he was an honest tax collector. What was it like when all those things where people no longer moved away from him? People invited him to sit with them, invited them to dine with him. What a life it must have had. And I would love to have heard the rest of the story. But we can only imagine what it would be from knowing what Jesus taught and how he teaches.